The dark season is the time for good, delicious cooking, and a good recipe is venison stew. Few ingredients, cooked quickly, and you will impress your guests. It's how it should be. And action. Oh, that's indeed delicious. I have the best venison from the hind leg here. And the nice thing is the pieces are not cut too small. The other ingredients, about the same amount of onions as we have meat, at least in terms of volume. A significant amount of cranberries, that's a small jar. We will take half of it for our goulash and set the rest aside. A little oil for frying, a bit of flour for dusting, and for our tea egg, we have here a teaspoon of juniper, 2 cloves, and 2 bay leaves. Peppercorns are, of course, included, and my secret spice, gingerbread spice. That gives the goulash a really good note. Speaking of notes, half is for my pot, and we want to keep silence about the other half. As you can see, I have placed the meat in a small sieve because it is still dripping a little. And we don't want this meat juice to be involved while frying. Next tip is to take your meat out of the fridge in time so that it is at room temperature. Then it just won't start to boil in the perfect pan while frying because we want color. That's why we add our oil. So it is hot. And now we put our meat in there. And I've said it so many times. It's a great quality, really fancy. I've often said, when we have the meat in the pan or in the pot or in the roasting pan, please leave it lying first, sear it first. It needs to have color. If you stir now, have the cold in the pan and then it will definitely start to boil. Here, as you hear and see, nothing is boiling, it is searing, and we have time to cut the onions. I cut the onions into not too fine strips because they will also cook down in the goulash, as they have the task of bringing us flavor and should also thicken the sauce a bit more. So just cut them down. If they are not completely even, it's not a big deal. So, haven't changed anything. I think you can even see the pieces of meat in the same place as before. And it hasn't boiled, and we don't have that moisture down here. You usually have when searing goulash. Now we want to turn a piece of meat. Look. There's the color we want. So, and now the meat already has some warmth. We don't need to turn everything individually. Now we can also stir it around a bit. We're waiting for the same brown result to develop everywhere. So if you have such good meat and good tools, and I keep pointing this out, this pot here, nothing sticks, and still you get color. Cleaning up afterwards is no problem at all. You don't have any black spots down there that ruin your food. Now we add the onions that we just chopped, and we saute the onions so that they also get a bit of color. That means just use the heat and keep sizzling. That's how cooking should be. So look, we already have blonde onions. They have a bit of color, and they are starting to break down. That's what we want. They should dissolve as much as possible afterwards. If there are still a few left, it's not a big deal, but that's where we want to go. And now we want to have a sauce later. And we want about half a liter of sauce, 4 people in this ragu. That should be enough. That's why I'm now adding some roux, where you usually calculate 50 grams of flour. I have half of that here. We'll dust it now. Try to distribute it evenly a bit. And we had oil in there, and stir the flour in a little. In doing so, the flour is, of course, A, distributed, and B, also ensure that the flour is lightly toasted. So, looks pretty good already. And before the flour takes on too much color, we will add a splash of red wine to it. And we will deglaze the whole thing. A strong splash like that. And now we ensure that all the roasting substances are released. Then we will have a nice dark color. You know the 1000 sauce base, glazing and deglazing. However, we must not work too hard here because please remember we have the flour. That's why we only deglaze once, and the second time a bit more vigorously. And I promised you we're putting half a bottle of wine in there. So And now everyone can see that's a bit too little sauce. It's clear we don't even have half a liter yet. We're lowering the temperature now. What do we fill it up with? Exactly, with a splash of water. So I'm actually adding another half liter of water because a lot will evaporate while cooking. What's important now is that the meat is completely submerged in the sauce. So far, so good. Now, our spice egg also comes into play. We'll just place it in between. It has the great advantage that we won't be biting into peppercorns and cloves later. Our cranberries, as mentioned, we'll add half of them because that's the secret that a game dish can also have a slightly sweet taste. We'll sprinkle in our gingerbread spice as well. And what we still don't have at this point, and this is very, very important, we need to salt the whole thing as well. Be careful with the salt, we can add more later. Taking it out is very bad, so now we stir everything together. I totally love this gingerbread spice. If someone has a hard time with it, they can simply leave it out, but they should at least try it once. Now we put the lid on, and we let it simmer 50 minutes on low heat. Then we'll take a look again. 50 minutes are just about up. Shall we take a look inside? Look at the sauce. Look at the color of the sauce. Really looks good. And I mentioned earlier that the onions would change. You can just barely make them out, but indeed they have done their job. They are melting right now and giving our venison goulash the necessary flavor and also thickness, as you can see. 30 grams of flour here for 4 people are really not worth mentioning. So, it's done. Little work, quick dish, foolproof. That's how we want it. Now we also want to taste it. I always use a small plate for tasting because I can put the sauce on it, take a closer look to see if there's anything I don't like. Sometimes the sauce is a bit too thin. You can see that wonderfully on the plate. And the second big advantage is that if I taste the sauce now, and if the sauce tastes good, then the meat will taste good too. And I don't burn my mouth because it's already cooled down on the plate. Having several small plates always helps. It is, of course, not unlike goulash in basic flavor, but it has this slight sweetness from the cranberries and also a hint of the Christmas spice comes through. Now let's try a piece of meat. The meat is so wonderfully tender, as one would expect from a goulash, so it falls apart, but still holds its structure. It is perfect, simply really good. If you like this quick recipe for the game season, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Carmen is calling you. We love you. Now join that. I wish you lots of fun recreating the recipe.